A good game gets harder as you play. No one wants to start off facing Gwen in Dark Souls. Games need to build players up so they can handle the challenge. That means the developers need to teach you how to play. Oftentimes, the first level or two are just cleverly disguised tutorials to get players acquainted with the mechanics of the game. Sure, you could have a more traditional tutorial, but giving players control right from the get-go is a much more fluid way to start the game. This tricks players into learning without them ever realizing it. And there is one game that does this flawlessly. So grab your red hat and power stars because this is media philosophy exploring the deeper side of difficulty scaling with Mario 64. So how does Mario 64 go from to... Well, it's through its progression item, the star. Collecting stars allow you to access more parts of the castle, and obtaining these stars usually requires the player to either engage in exploration, combat, or platforming, or some combination of the three. As players begin mastering the core fundamentals of the game, the conditions to obtain these stars become harder. And the difficulty is very level specific as each level has their unique hazards and enemies that affect the difficulty. You'll see that as the game progresses, it's easier to fall off or get killed by enemies, and there should never be a level easier than the first. The first level is of the utmost importance to a game because it lays the groundwork for the rest of the game. In Mario 64, you learn the basics of running, jumping, and combat. This makes Mario 64's Bomb-Omb Battlefield one of the greatest testing grounds. There are wide open spaces to run and get accustomed to the controls. The enemies are mostly populated by Goombas, which move pretty slow, telegraph their movements, and barely do any damage. Looking around Bomb-Omb Battlefield, you'll notice that there are no places where you can really fall to your death. The game doesn't require any real platforming at this point. Thinking back to the 1990s, this is a lot of people's first taste of 3D, meaning that a lot of those innate skills that carry over from one game to the next weren't developed yet. So Mario 64 had to teach people how to handle themselves in this new environment. That's why the first level is largely centered around exploration. And being that this is the first level, the exploration is pretty straightforward. At the beginning, the developers even herd you in one direction to make sure you can't get lost. But all the developers want you to learn is how to maneuver in this world with options like the cannon. That's why they reward you for just going on top of the floating island. It also shows you that if something looks odd, it may serve a purpose. Bomb-Omb Battlefield really isn't too big either, making it hard to get lost. Each little subsection of the level is easy to distinguish from the others, and traveling from one region to the other takes very little thought or skill. Players won't need much help orienting themselves, which make hunting down the first set of 8 red coins a breeze. But Mario 64 isn't all about exploration. The first level needs to prepare you to face Bowser. Cue the boss battle with King Bomb-Omb. King Bomb-Omb is essentially a neutered version of the Bowser fight. You run around him, pick him up, and voila! And to assure that the player doesn't get too discouraged, you can't even die. It's almost fun to get tossed around by him. Whee! So now that you grabbed your first star, let's move on to Whomp's Fortress. This is the level that starts to introduce some platforming elements, but they're still not too difficult or dangerous. Taking a bird's eye view, you can see that there's usually ground beneath you if you fall, and plenty of coins to refill your health. And you can see that most of the level is fairly connected. There's really not much in terms of branching paths, so it's easy to get from one place to another as long as you stick to the path. With it being the second level, the game still needs to perform some basic skill checks. You can't beat Whomp without the ground pound, thus building your arsenal and showing you how glitchy this game can be. But that's really half the fun, right? Already in the second level, we see a very subtle but noticeable shift in difficulty as the enemies start packing a little bit more of a punch. But they're either real slow or stationary, so this level shouldn't give players much difficulty. Except for that damn star inside the basket. Shoot. By this point, you should have a few stars under your belt and feeling a little more confident, so the game presents its first difficulty spike, however minor it may be. In Cool Mountain, there are plenty of opportunities to accidentally fall, slip off the ice, or get pushed off the track by that stupid racing penguin. Seriously, 20 years later and he's still no easier. Despite this penguin from hell, the difficulty is still quite manageable. First, you start on top of the mountain, and going down a mountain is much simpler than going up one. And if you need an explanation why, well, I'm sure some physics channel can oblige. In previous levels, you were relatively safe, but had to scale something, whereas in Cool Mountain, you can die much more easily, but you're mostly just sliding down. And to make getting all the red coins much more doable, there are many ways to easily get back to different parts of the mountain. One of the ways the developers up the difficulty, while still keeping the level easy, is by making the majority of the star locations near one another. 4 of the stars are right by the penguin or on the way to get to the penguin, meaning whether you slide down or take the chimney, as long as you can get to the base of the mountain, you'll be near a star. And one of the stars wants you to learn how to wall kick to get it, and the developers don't want to rush you or punish you for failing, so they give you a heart refill so you can practice it over and over again until you master the wall kick. By now, you should have enough of the basics down to get 8 stars, meaning that Bowser awaits. And Bowser in the Dark World is the perfect proving ground for your newfound skills. The level has less built-in safety nets without the railings, but the enemies you encounter either aren't too aggressive or mostly stationary. Seriously, you have to try to get hit by these things. There we go. And a lot of the platforming can be avoided by just being patient and moving carefully, yet death is always a missed jump away. But if you're trying to go for the 8 red coins here, there's not too much added danger. You should be able to make your way through the obstacles and face off with Bowser for a simple enough fight. You see bombs all around, you know you can pick up baddies from behind. All that's left is ruining your Palm and N64 controller by sending Bowser flying. Now this is just the first area. The basement is where concepts start to build on each other and the punishment for bad platforming becomes harsher. But first, let's take a look at Big Boo's Haunt. Big Boo's Haunt is the first area that really promotes exploring a level where getting from one part to the next is not as easy, as the individual rooms and differing levels isolate the players, creating a reasonable difficulty spike. Most of the rooms lead to the other rooms or a dead end, making keeping track of where you've been easier. While there is a large focus on combat and health management with flying books, staring eyes, and killer pianos, the boos reward you handsomely, making HP management doable. And there are minor platforming elements in Big Boo's Haunt, but the punishments for failing is more of an annoyance than anything. If I fall off this roof just one more time... Ugh! Now that we're in the basement proper, let's examine Shifting Sandland. With Shifting Sandland, exploration becomes more difficult as deadly sand pits restrict free movement. The player does have a few options to open the level up by either using the wing cap or even this jumping box thing. One of the cool things about the basement is that some levels have a world within the world, like the pyramid or the volcano. So while the desert can have you focus on exploring and overcoming hazards, the inside of the pyramid allows players to practice platforming in a much more safe environment. Within the pyramid, the sand sinks much more slowly, meaning you should be able to get to safety. And then, once you've reached the top, you can see some clues to other stars in this level. Moving on to Lethal Lava Land, it carries a few of the same themes from Shifting Sandland. Exploration is still impeded by danger. In this case, just one wrong jump could get you stuck in a butt-burning death loop. I'll have my buns toasted. Just like how the desert gave you the wing cap to help you traverse this land, Lethal Lava Land gives you the shell. And this was always the coolest. By using the shell, you can really get a good lay of the land, and you'll see while each region has its own challenges, getting to each section of the map isn't too hard from the center volcano. The wing cap can even make the most out-of-the-way star the simplest by just flying to it. Once you get through exploring the lava land, it's time to put your platforming skills to the test yet again within the volcano. And while any missed jump can be deadly, there is a heart so you can keep trying. This level definitely has a big emphasis on combat with the multiple bully fights, but the level is at an appropriate difficulty because it's fairly easy to see what leads where, and you have multiple ways to get across the map. It may be lethal, but it's manageable. So far, knowing where you've been has been fairly easy, as most levels are just big squares with a central focal point. But all of this changes with Hazy Maze Cave, where it's so big, the game even gives you a map. Players start to learn that going one way cuts you off from exploring the other. In Hazy Cave Maze, there's no real straightforward way back to the red coin room from Nessie's chambers, so getting to know the lay of the land will be key to your success. And throughout the level, you'll be faced with different path choices that you need to memorize if you want to get some of those stars that are right in front of you. These branching paths create a welcome new challenge. One cool lesson found in this level is that knowing how to perform certain jumps will give you shortcuts to other parts of the level. If you know how to long jump, you can get right into the room with the boulders, but if you can't, no big deal. It'll just take a little bit more time. So you have 30 stars and you're ready to face Bowser yet again, once you complete one more water level. And this just builds off the concepts of the first water level, except now there's a little bit more danger. In Bowser in the Sea of Fire, your platforming skills will need to be sharp because there are few safety nets. There is a heart and plenty of lives so you won't game over, but you need to focus the entire level. It doesn't matter how close you are to the end, you can quickly die with one mistimed jump. Congratulations, you made it to the second floor. And the second floor is interesting because it has some really hard levels and some not so hard levels. For example, Snowman Land is a pretty straightforward level this late into the game. It has several stars right within your grasp from the get-go, and the red coins are all fairly close together. Sometimes giving the players a little room to breathe after pushing them helps them keep going, but the other levels like Tall Mountain aren't as forgiving. Unlike Cool Mountain, which placed you safely at the top, here it's your job to reach the summit, meaning that you'll have to carefully make your way around many obstacles. Luckily, there aren't too many places where you face an instant death, but most falls will bring you back down to the early stages of the level, where it may as well just have killed you. It is fun how there are multiple ways to at least get to the first tier of the mountain, but Tall Mountain is heavily centered around platforming to get to many of these stars. And when you're done playing with the monkeys, let's head over to Little Big Mountain. And this is a level that really makes you start combining the conditions. For example, to get the Wiggler star, you'll need to first explore and drain the top of the mountain, and then go back up and face the boss that even Dark Souls would reject for being too hard. And what's really cool is that your choice to start either small or big dictates how you begin the level. Depending on which star you're chasing, each orientation has its pros and cons. And it's interesting that as the levels get bigger and more complex, the red coins become more condensed. In earlier levels, the red coins are spread out throughout the level to help promote exploring safe, manageable areas. But once the levels get bigger, the red coins are closer together, so instead, these bigger levels use secrets that are spread across the level. And then you have the third water level, Wet Dry World, the accumulation of all the other water levels. Yeah, the water changing mechanic does add a serious challenge, but this is the final water level, so it doesn't have much to teach. After a little struggle, you complete the next leg of your journey, and now you're onto the third floor. You're so close, you can almost taste that cake. And by now, the game doesn't have too much left to teach you, but it does have one last difficulty spike before the final showdown, and Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Ride holds no punches. These two levels are interesting final levels because they're almost the complete opposite of each other. Whereas Rainbow Ride is wide with many different areas, Tick-Tock Clock is vertical with a mostly single path. Tick-Tock Clock might look like all the stars are right next to each other, but there are so many traps and tricky jumps that will get you in trouble. And Rainbow Ride is split into several different regions, and each region has a few stars for you to nab, but getting from one region to the other is not easy. Neither one of these levels have any real safety net, so players should be prepared to die a lot. But like Baptism by Fire, players are now battle ready for Mario 64's final challenge. But to reach the final boss, you need 70 stars, which is about 60% of all the stars. So while you can supplement your total with a few secret stars, you're going to have to face the majority of the challenges like that stupid eel. Honestly, why are you in the first area? But with enough patience and practice, you should be able to master the skills in this game and enter Bowser in the Sky. Here, the game throws everything at you. One fall and you find yourself severely hurt and near the start. But as you learned, there are little shortcuts you can take if you have the skills, and if you don't, well, there are other ways around. From the first fight with King Bomb to the final bomb blast, this game prepares you for any challenges by slowly spiking the difficulty. Developers maybe add more kill planes or turn the ground into hot lava. Whatever it is, the transition is seamless because the game gives you time to practice and master the skills needed to succeed. This is media philosophy exploring the deeper side of entertainment. And if you like this video, go and bake a cake.